He walks into a wartime radar lab with almost no schooling past the 6th grade, and in his coat pocket, a candy bar has just turned into a warm, gooey mess. He didn't drop it. He didn't leave it in the sun. It melted right there against his body, standing next to a humming piece of military equipment. Everyone else in that lab had walked past the same machine countless times. So why him? And why that day? This one strange, sticky moment will put him on the path to inventing an appliance that now sits in kitchens across almost the entire country. But here's the thing, he almost didn't stop to ask why. Picture it. It's 1945. There's a war on. This is a man with deadlines, with output quotas, with a country counting on the equipment coming out of this lab. The easy thing, the understandable thing, would have been to wipe off his pocket, mutter something about the heat, and get back to work. Most people would have. But something made him pause. Something in him just couldn't let it go. Something made him ask the one question that changes everything. Wait, why did that just happen? To understand why this particular man was the one who stopped and looked closer, you have to go back a few decades, to a small town in Maine. Percy Spencer was born in 1894 in Howland, and life did not hand him an easy start. He lost his father as an infant, before he was even old enough to form a memory of him, and when his mother could no longer care for him, an aunt and uncle stepped in and raised him in modest, hard-working circumstances. There was no path being cleared for him toward a university or an engineering degree. No family connections, no tuition set aside, no expectation that he'd ever sit in a classroom studying physics. Around age 12, Percy left school altogether to go to work and help support the family. On paper, that should have been the end of his education. A boy who leaves school before his teenage years even really begin doesn't usually end up remembered in history books. Instead, it was just the beginning of a different kind of education entirely. At 18, Percy joined the U.S. Navy, and it was there, standing watch through long hours, that he started teaching himself electronics and physics from textbooks, page by page, concept by concept, whenever he had a spare hour to himself. No professors guiding him, no classroom discussions, no formal curriculum at all, just curiosity and discipline night after night, working through material that most people only tackle with a teacher standing over their shoulder. Somehow, that homemade education worked so well that Percy Spencer became one of the country's leading experts on a highly technical, highly secretive piece of wartime hardware called the magnetron, the tube at the heart of radar technology, the kind of device that entire military strategies depended on. At Raytheon, with no formal engineering degree to his name, he helped scale up magnetron production so dramatically that it became one of the quiet, unsung engineering triumphs of the war effort, the sort of behind-the-scenes achievement that never makes headlines but changes the outcome of history all the same. He'd outlearned people with far more schooling than he'd ever had, simply by refusing to stop being curious, one textbook at a time. Which brings us back to that melted candy bar. As the famous story goes, Spencer was standing near an active magnetron he was testing, the same tube he'd spent years mastering, when he felt something odd in his pocket. Warm, then soft, then unmistakably melted. A ruined candy bar turned to chocolate soup, for no reason he could immediately explain. There was no fire nearby, no sun beating down on him, no heat source he could point to and say, "Ah, that explains it." Just invisible energy pouring off the machine he was working on, doing something he couldn't see happening in the moment. Now, a lot of engineers might have chalked it up to a fluke, tossed the ruined candy in the trash and moved on with their day, chasing that deadline. Percy Spencer did the opposite. He got curious. And curiosity, as it turns out, was about to become one of the most productive habits in American invention history. So what did he do next? He didn't reach for a notebook or a formula. He reached for popcorn kernels. Spencer brought a handful over to the magnetron, and within moments, pop, 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 kernels were bursting into fluffy white popcorn right there in the lab. No stove, no fire, no pan in sight anywhere. Try to imagine the scene. A room full of serious wartime radar engineers, heads down in their technical work, suddenly surrounded by fresh popcorn popping with no visible source of heat at all. It must have felt like magic. But Spencer wasn't finished. If invisible energy could pop corn, what else could it do? Next, as the story goes, he decided to test an egg. He placed it in a kettle beneath the magnetron, curious to see what would happen. A curious colleague leaned in for a closer look, right as pressure built up and the egg burst, splattering him and giving him quite the story to tell at dinner that night. It was the kind of moment that makes you laugh out loud and immediately want to know more proof that something remarkable was happening, something worth chasing all the way to the end, no matter how strange the path there had already been. And chase it he did. Spencer and the team at Raytheon turned that unplanned kitchen chaos into real science, patenting a process for cooking with microwave energy. By 1947, Raytheon unveiled the very first commercial microwave oven, named the Radarange. And it was, by any modern standard, a beast of a machine, standing nearly 6 feet tall, weighing hundreds of pounds, and costing several times as much as a typical brand-new car. This was not some sleek countertop convenience. It was a hulking cabinet of a machine that required real floor space and a real budget. It wasn't heading into anyone's home kitchen anytime soon. It went to restaurants, to ocean liners, to institutions that could afford the investment and had the space to house something that size. So how does a 6-foot-tall, enormously expensive kitchen giant end up shrinking down onto practically every countertop in America? Time, mostly, and the same relentless tinkering spirit Spencer brought to that very first test with a handful of popcorn kernels. Over the following decades, engineers refined the technology, shrank the components down piece by piece, brought down the cost, and made it safer and simpler for everyday use by ordinary families rather than restaurant kitchens and ocean liners. Bit by bit, the Radarange evolved from a commercial marvel into something many families could afford, and many kitchens could fit, tucked neatly on a counter instead of anchored to a floor. Today, microwave ovens sit in more than 9 out of every 10 American homes, reheating leftovers, popping late-night popcorn, warming up breakfast before school, humming away quietly in the background of daily life. It has become so ordinary, so unremarkable, so completely woven into the rhythm of an average day that we barely think about it. And that's exactly the point. Because it all traces back to one man, standing in a lab, noticing a candy bar had melted in his pocket, and choosing to get curious. Percy Spencer never earned an engineering degree. He left school at 12, taught himself from textbooks, and stood watch in the Navy long before he ever stood in front of a magnetron. But he went on to receive roughly 150 patents and earned a place in the National Inventors Hall of Fame, right alongside inventors with all the formal credentials in the world. All because he refused to let a strange little moment pass by unquestioned. So the next time something melts, pops, or surprises you in some small, unexplainable way, maybe don't just wipe it off and move on. Ask why. You never know what you might end up putting in every kitchen in America.